Something is happening in the gardens of people who stopped pulling weeds. Their soil is improving without amendments. Their medicine cabinet is shrinking, and their grocery bills are dropping, all from plants they used to destroy on site. The same weeds sprayed, pulled, and cursed across millions of gardens from every weekend are feeding, healing, and protecting the properties of the people who finally looked them up. These 20 weeds are the reason why. Number 20, dandelion. Every part of this plant is useful and almost nobody knows it. Dandelion roots reach 30 centimeters or deeper into compacted soil, breaking through hard pan layers that garden forks cannot reach, and pulling calcium, iron, and potassium from depths where most vegetable roots never penetrate. When the plant dies back, those minerals are deposited at the surface through decomposing leaves, fertilizing the surrounding soil for free. The leaves are edible at every growth stage. Young spring leaves carry a peppery bite somewhere between rocket and endive, mild enough early in the season to toss straight into a salad without anyone at the table noticing anything unusual. By midsummer, that same leaf has turned noticeably more bitter, closer to raw chicory, which is exactly why experienced foragers only harvest the youngest growth and leave the rest for the bees. The root, dried and roasted until it darkens to the color of strong tea, produces a coffee substitute with a genuinely similar bitterness and aroma, no caffeine involved. The flowers turn into a pale gold wine that homebrewers have been quietly making for generations. One of the few wines made entirely from a plant most people consider a nuisance rather than an ingredient. Every part of the dandelion earns its space. The garden industry spent decades teaching you to kill it, but there is one weed on this list that an entire industry once advertised, then quietly turned against the moment it stopped being profitable. Number 19, clover. White clover was deliberately removed from the definition of a desirable lawn plant in the 1950s when broadleaf herbicide manufacturers realized their products killed it. Before that, clover in a lawn was considered a premium feature. Seed companies advertised it as a sign of a well-cared-for property. Estates cultivated it deliberately, mixing it into seed blends specifically because it stayed green through drought when the surrounding grass turned brown. Clover fixes atmospheric nitrogen through root nodules containing rhizobium bacteria. A lawn or garden bed with established clover fertilizes itself continuously, season after season, with no input from you. The flowers support pollinators in numbers grass never will. The leaves are edible and high in protein, historically used as a famine food in parts of Europe when grain crops failed. A plant that feeds your soil and costs nothing, reclassified as a weed by the industry that profits from convincing you to replace it every year. If this list is already changing how you see your garden, hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it pushes this information toward every gardener still spraying these plants without knowing what they are destroying. Up next is a weed that has been quietly treating wounds for 2,000 years, and the proof is something you can test on your own skin in under a minute. Number 18, plantain, not the banana. The flat rosette weed with parallel veined leaves growing in the compacted, disturbed soil of every temperate garden on the planet. Plantago major has a documented history of medicinal use, spanning over 2,000 years across cultures with no contact with each other. The leaves contain aucubin, which carries confirmed anti-inflammatory properties, and allantoin, which promotes cell repair and shows up synthetically in commercial wound care products today. Crush a fresh leaf between your fingers until it goes slightly slick and green. Then press it directly onto a bee sting or a nettle rash. The swelling visibly eases within minutes, and the sting itself stops registering almost as quickly as the leaf makes contact. This is not folk remedy speculation. It is documented phytochemistry, doing exactly what people noticed it doing for 2 millennia, long before anyone could explain why. As a soil indicator, dense plantain signals compaction. Fix the compaction and the plantain thins out on its own, no removal required. So that handles dry land. What about the weed growing in your pond that Roman legions were issued as rations? Number 17, watercress. Growing wild in and around ponds and consistently wet ground, watercress carries more vitamin C than an orange and more iron than spinach. gram for gram. Roman soldiers were issued it as part of their field rations, on the theory, accurate as it turns out, that it kept them sharper and less prone to illness on long campaigns. Medieval physicians prescribed it for scurvy centuries before anyone understood what vitamin C actually was. Bite into a raw stem straight from the water, and the heat hits a beat later than you expect. A sharp, peppery flush close to horseradish. Nothing like the mild bagged version sold in supermarkets that has usually been sitting in plastic for a week by the time it reaches you. In a garden pond, it also works as a filter, pulling excess nitrates and phosphates out of the water before they can feed an algae bloom. It cleans the water it grows in, for free, while producing a harvest from the same square meter. Now picture something that looks exactly like clover until the moment you bite it, and then absolutely nothing about it feels familiar again. Number 16. Wood sorrel. Wood sorrel looks like clover from a distance, but tastes nothing like it. Bite a leaf, and an immediate, bright citrus sourness floods the mouth, sharper than lemon and gone just as fast, courtesy of the oxalic acid that also gives rhubarb its bite. In the garden, it spreads into a dense, low mat that suppresses weeds and holds surface moisture. In Japanese temple gardens and medieval European orchards, it was cultivated on purpose as a living mulch under fruit trees, valued precisely for the job it now does uninvited. It performs that same function, whether anyone planted it there or not. The leaves make their way into salads at restaurants charging a premium for a garnish called sorrel, often listed on a menu with a name that sounds far more exotic than the plant actually is. It is growing under your tomatoes for free, doing exactly what the chef is charging for. The next plant on this list stings hard enough to make most gardeners avoid it completely, and that single reaction has cost them more than they realize. Number 15. Nettle. The sting is the entire reason most gardeners never go near it, and that reaction has cost them one of the more useful plants on this list. Young nettle tops, harvested with gloves before the plant flowers, lose their sting completely once blanched, leaving behind a cooked green close to spinach with a slightly deeper, earthier edge that holds up well in a soup or stirred into eggs. Submerge a larger harvest in a bucket of water for 2 to 3 weeks instead, and you get fermented nettle tea, a nitrogen and potassium-rich concentrate that feeds roses and vegetables as effectively as a bottled fertilizer, applied at a dilution of roughly 1 part to 10 parts water. The smell during fermentation is genuinely unpleasant, somewhere between drains and silage. The results are not. Nettle stings once. It pays back for every season after. Here is one most gardeners pull the moment they see it, purely because it makes a tidy seedbed look messy. That instinct is exactly backwards. Number 14. Chickweed. Chickweed covers bare soil in winter and early spring before almost anything else can germinate. And most gardeners pull it specifically because freshly turned soil looks tidier without it. That instinct works against you. A mat of chickweed across exposed earth is doing the same job as a cover crop, shielding the surface from rain compaction and frost heave through the worst months of the year without being seeded, watered, or paid for. Pull it in January, and the bare soil underneath is often left exposed to exactly the weather it was protecting against. It is also edible from the moment it appears, mild and faintly sweet, closer to a soft lettuce than anything resembling a weed, and tender enough to eat raw straight off the plant with no preparation. Where it grows thickest, the soil underneath tends to be moist, fertile, and exactly what a vegetable bed wants to be before anything else goes into it. The next weed has survived every mass extinction the planet has ever produced. Pulling it out of your flower bed was never going to be the thing that finally stops it. Number 13. Horsetail. Fossil records put horsetail at over 300 million years old. It has outlasted every mass extinction the planet has thrown at it, including the one that ended the dinosaurs, which says something about why it outlasts whatever you throw at it in a flower bed. That same deep rhizome network that makes it nearly impossible to pull is what allows it to draw silica and calcium up from far below the surface, depositing both at the soil surface as the above-ground growth dies back each winter. Simmer the dried stems in water, dilute the result, and you get a foliar spray that organic growers have used for decades against powdery mildew and black spot. The silica forms a microscopic barrier on the leaf surface that fungal spores struggle to get a grip on, essentially armoring the leaf from the outside in. 300 million years of practice, fighting for survival, and it turns out some of that experience transfers directly onto your roses. Ask any gardener to describe the next plant, and you get one word. Ask a Roman soldier, and the answer would have been completely different. Number 12, ground elder. Ground elder. Most gardeners call it impossible. The Romans introduced it to Northern Europe on purpose, as food and medicine, and it stayed in cultivation through monastery gardens well into the medieval period, prescribed specifically for gout, which is where the name bishopweed comes from. It only stopped being eaten when diets narrowed under industrial agriculture, and the long list of edible wild greens shrank down to whatever could be packaged and shipped at scale. The plant never changed. The category it was filed under did. Young spring leaves taste close to parsley, with a faint anise note, eaten raw or cooked before the plant flowers and turns noticeably more bitter. In a contained bed with hard edging, it forms a permanent ground cover that needs nothing from you, ever, which is precisely the trait that makes it so hard to remove anywhere you didn't intend to plant it. Next up is a weed growing in the cracks of your driveway that contains more omega-3 than fish. Yes, fish. Number 11, purslane. Purslane carries more omega-3 fatty acids per fresh weight than flaxseed, and it manages this while growing in the cracks of paving stones with no water and no help, often in the exact spot where every other plant on the property has already given up. It has been eaten in Greek, Turkish, and Lebanese kitchens for over 2,000 years without interruption. The gap exists almost entirely in Northern Europe and North America, where industrial agriculture quietly narrowed the list of plants considered food down to a handful of reliably shippable crops. The succulent stems snap cleanly between the teeth, mild and faintly tangy, with more crunch than most things sold in a bagged salad mix, and a slight juiciness that makes it surprisingly refreshing on a hot day. A plant producing that nutritional profile, while growing somewhere most vegetables would die, is not really a weed. It is a crop that simply never asked for cultivation. The next one builds an army, a real one, with predators, patrols, and a kill count that no spray bottle has ever matched. Number 10, yarrow. Stand near a flowering yarrow plant on a warm afternoon, and you will see why pest control companies should be nervous. Ladybirds, lacewings, parasitic wasps, and hoverflies move across the flat-topped flower clusters constantly, and the populations they build there range out across the rest of the garden, hunting aphids and caterpillars on every other plant nearby, often before you ever notice the pest problem existed in the first place. That is biological pest control running on its own, for free, indefinitely. The dried leaves were carried as a wound dressing from Roman field medics through to First World War stretcher bearers under the name woundwort, because crushed yarrow promotes clotting on a fresh cut. Plant it in a corner once, and the predator population it sustains works the whole garden for you, season after season, without you having to lift another finger. If you have made it this far, and you are still not subscribed, hit that subscribe button right now. Every week we publish guides like this one. Now here's the part where this list gets genuinely uncomfortable for the pharmaceutical industry. Number 9, St. John's wort. The bright yellow flowers open in midsummer, traditionally around the 24th of June, which is exactly where the name comes from, and exactly when the plant's hypericin content peaks at its highest concentration of the year. Multiple clinical trials have found St. John's wort effective for mild to moderate depression, comparable in some comparisons to certain prescription antidepressants. It is also one of the more dangerous plants on this list to use casually. It interacts seriously with a long list of medications, including oral contraceptives, blood thinners, and other antidepressants, by accelerating how the liver clears them. Anyone taking regular medication should talk to a doctor before using it medicinally, not just look it up online. As a garden plant left simply to grow, it is harmless, attractive to native bees, and asks for nothing. What comes next is the one weed on this list that has somehow never been turned into a single commercial product, despite being 2 harvests in one plant. Number 8, elderflower and elderberry. Most gardeners cut elder back the moment it appears uninvited along a fence line, with no idea what they are removing in the process. The flowers, harvested in early summer just as they open fully, steep into a cordial the color of pale honey, floral, and faintly muscat-like. The same drink sold in glass bottles at a markup in delicatessens and farmers markets. The berries, ready by early autumn, turn deep purple black and cook down into a syrup with a tart, winey depth that no commercial berry comes close to replicating. Raw elderberries and uncooked elder leaves and bark are mildly toxic and should never be eaten without cooking. The syrup and cordial recipes that call for cooking exist for that reason, not as a suggestion that can be skipped. Handled correctly, a single self-seeded elder gives 2 separate harvests a year, for the cost of leaving it alone where it already grew. The next one produces a color that florists struggle to fake, and it does it while planting itself wherever it pleases. Number 7. Borage. The flowers are a true, vivid blue, rare enough in the plant world that florists struggle to match it artificially, even with dye. Freeze a few into ice cubes and drop them into a summer drink, and the color holds, suspended, long after the flower itself would have wilted on a plate sitting in the sun. Underground, borage's deep roots pull calcium and potassium up from subsoil and deposit it at the surface as the leaves die back, which is why organic growers chop it repeatedly through the season purely as a mineral-rich mulch for everything growing nearby. Planted near tomatoes, it also seems to repel hornworms, who avoid its foliage for reasons nobody has fully nailed down even now. It self-seeds without asking permission, and somehow that has never once been a complaint from the people who grow it. Up next is a root that reaches further into the earth than almost anything else in this list, and the smell it produces along the way is genuinely one of the worst in gardening. Number 6. Comfrey. The taproot on a mature comfrey plant can reach 1.5 meters down, well past anywhere a fork or a fertilizer ever reaches, pulling phosphorus and trace minerals up from depths most garden plants can only guess exist beneath them. Cut the leaves 4 to 6 times a season, and they collapse into a dark, slightly slimy mulch within days, releasing nutrients fast enough that gardeners use it as a direct feed at the base of fruiting plants right when flowers are setting. Submerge a bucketful in water for 3 weeks instead, and the resulting liquid, diluted, becomes a potassium-rich feed for tomatoes and roses alike. Be warned, the fermentation smell is one of the worst in gardening, closer to drains than compost, strong enough that most growers brew it as far from the house as the garden allows. The same allantoin that makes comfrey such a potent plant feed also speeds tissue repair when applied as a poultice to a bruise or sprain, which is exactly why it shows up in commercial skin creams today, often under names that give no hint of where the active ingredient actually came from. The next weed on this list is older than most of the vegetables growing right next to it, by about 5,000 years. Number 5. Fat hen. Archaeologists have found fat hen seeds at human settlement sites dating back over 5,000 years, which makes it a food crop older than most of the vegetables currently in your garden, including several that get marketed as ancient grains today. It grows fast and tall, throwing shade that suppresses weeds underneath it, while its roots quietly aerate the soil as they push downward. Young leaves, harvested before flowering, taste mild and slightly mineral, closer to spinach than anything you would expect from a plant most people pull on sight without a second look. Older seed heads can be ground into a flour once used in flatbreads and porridges across multiple continents, back when this plant was simply called food, rather than a weed to be eliminated. It self-seeds freely. One season left alone, and you have a permanent crop you never planted and never have to plant again. What comes next is sitting in your hedge right now, doing something for your heart that most people would assume needs a prescription. Number 4. Hawthorn. Cut back, pulled out, treated as a hedge nuisance, and almost never recognized for what it actually is, hiding in plain sight. The berries, called haws, turn a deep, dull red by autumn, and have been the subject of multiple clinical trials into cardiovascular health, with documented effects on mild to moderate heart failure outcomes, making hawthorn one of the more clinically supported herbal treatments in regular use across parts of Europe. As with any plant being considered for a heart condition, that conversation belongs with a doctor first, not a video. As a hedge, it does something no single supplement can: thorny growth that shelters nesting birds from predators, early nectar for the first bees emerging in spring, and berries that feed thrushes and blackbirds straight through into winter when little else is left. One boundary plant doing 4 separate jobs that nobody asked it to do and nobody is paying it to perform. 3 left. And the next one does for nitrogen what a fertilizer bag does, except nobody had to manufacture it. Number 3, vetch. Hairy vetch climbs through whatever is nearby, weaving a dense mat that fixes nitrogen straight from the air through bacteria living in its roots, converting it into a form plants can actually use. Cut or rolled flat, the vines collapse into a slow-release mulch that feeds the soil for weeks as it breaks down underneath whatever you grow next. Organic farmers plant it deliberately ahead of nitrogen-hungry crops for exactly this reason, often relying on it instead of a bagged fertilizer entirely. If it has simply shown up in a bare corner of your garden, it is doing the same job that a farmer pays for free, while feeding bumblebees on its purple flowers in the process and asking nothing in return. The name of the next weed was not chosen by accident, and 3 separate cultures with 0 contact with each other all arrived at the same conclusion about why. Number 2, self-heal, Prunella vulgaris. The name was not chosen carelessly. Self-heal contains rosmarinic acid and a cluster of polyphenols studied for antiviral and anti-inflammatory activity, and its use as a wound treatment and throat remedy shows up independently across Chinese, European, and indigenous North American herbal traditions. 3 lineages with no contact between them arriving at the same conclusion about the same low purple flower. In a lawn, it survives mowing in a way almost nothing else flowering can, throwing up small purple spikes that bumblebees visit constantly through summer and autumn, often the only flowering plant left in a lawn cut weekly all season. Where every other flower has been cut into oblivion, self-heal just keeps going, quietly doing the one thing a closely mown lawn otherwise can't. And now, the one weed on this entire list that almost everybody gets completely wrong about what it's actually doing. Number 1, creeping buttercup. This is the weed most gardeners are angriest at, and the one most worth understanding properly before you reach for anything to remove it. It shows up in waterlogged, compacted, calcium-poor soil. It did not cause those conditions. It is responding to them, the same way a fever responds to an infection rather than causing it. The fibrous root system that makes it so stubborn to pull is, at the same time, quietly opening channels through that compacted ground, improving the drainage and aeration the plant's own presence was telling you was missing in the first place. Pull it without addressing the drainage and the calcium, and it comes straight back within a season, because nothing about the underlying problem changed when you remove the symptom rather than the cause. Fix the drainage, add lime to lift the calcium, loosen the compaction with a fork, and creeping buttercup thins out and disappears on its own over the following year or 2. No herbicide required at any point in the process. It is not a problem plant growing in an otherwise healthy garden. It is a diagnosis, growing in exactly the spot that needs one, delivered for free, asking nothing from you except that you finally read what it has been trying to tell you all along. 20 weeds, every one of them doing something your garden needs. Thanks for watching. If this changed how you see the plants you've been pulling out of your garden every season, let us know in the comments which weed surprised you most. Want to see the 20 ground cover plants that replace your lawn entirely and never need mowing? Click on the left. And if you do not want to miss more guides like this one, hit that subscribe button now.